Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Catering Circle, Episode 2, COVID-19 Special Season 2020. My name is Aki Rahman and I will be your host this evening. As you know, the hospitality industry has taken a massive hit from the pandemic, and my fellow guests and I tonight will be exploring and sharing various ideas on how restaurants are responding to this crisis. In segment 1 tonight, we will see what preventive measures they have been taking and how they've adapted their business to the crisis. In segment 2, we will look at the government checklist for the compliance. And in segment 3, how to stay safe with survival strategies. Let's go back to last week, episode 1, and have a recap of what went on last week. Thank you.
And welcome to the Catering Circle COVID-19 special season. My name is Samiuddin and I'll be your host for this evening.
Episode 1, Financial Planning, Budgeting, Menu Engineering, Weekly Financials, POS Integration.
The government also responded in the hospitality industry unconditionally.
It's a learning curve for everyone, both for customers, but more so for management, because they have huge responsibilities which they have to.
If you can't reduce your overheads, then you will not have the profit.
There are other technologies that people utilized that I think worked for them. It's a marketing tool. Where we go wrong is we don't invest anything on marketing.
কোভিড ক্রাইসিসে নানাভাবে টিকে থাকার চেষ্টা করছে রেস্টুরেন্ট ইন্ডাস্ট্রি। ফার্লো বেতন সুবিধা, ইট আউট, হেল্প আউট সহ সরকারের নানা সহযোগিতা দারুণভাবে সহায়ক এই কঠিন দিনে। তবে বড় কথা হচ্ছে এই কঠিন দিনেও মানুষ আরও ভালো সার্ভিস চায় হেলথ সেফটির নিশ্চয়তা। Mohammed Jubair, Channel S News, London.
Obviously, Eat Out, Help Out, 100 million plus been claimed from the government itself. And you can see it was packed. Just be smart businessmen to take advantage of that.
Every business needs a cash flow. In the restaurant, so many things you can develop.
I started a 3-tier dining. So it's 5:30, 7 o'clock and 8:30.
Course technology and specialized services, specialized advice as well. In those two sectors, a small business can claim from 1,000 to 5,000.
Bangladeshi catering sector shies away from a consultant.
It is changing a lot. And now people are seeking for specialized advice.
We've got to be ready for other businesses like the takeaways. It has to be ready with technology, with all the customer demands.
Products should not be kept in the fridge.
We actually started cooking for all the frontline staff.
We initially closed for the first 3 weeks, including takeaways.
We are business people, we've got to make money. Technology is one of the way forward.
Don't go and spend all that money you made in August.
Share the information and continue success.
Where customers feel threatened because we're coming towards maybe another lockdown. And what is our procedures that we're putting in to make them feel comfortable?
Finance within your business and budgeting that finance for the next 6 months coming.
Do you think the rule of 6 will affect business?
We have no choice. We have to take this virus very seriously. It's a life and death thing, and we've got to make sure that we follow the government instructions.
Welcome back, and without further ado, let's meet our guests tonight. Now, to my left is a man who needs no introduction, Mr. Ahmedussamad Chowdhury JP, Chairman of Channel S Television, a serial entrepreneur, a philanthropist and media mogul in his own right. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum.
Excellent. To my right, we have Dr. Zaki Rezwana Anwar, with an illustrious media career and various medical and philanthropic contributions. She's also a mother and child specialist.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem, thank you. We go to our left to Arlene Auf de Mauer, who is a training consultant and has 15 years of experience in food and safety training, and by trade is also a biochemist. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Finally, we come to a man who I've had the pleasure of meeting on various occasions, a fantastic personality and an even better restaurateur. Executive member of the Catering Circle, winner of the Catering Circle Talent Show Awards 2017. Assalamu alaikum, my dear friend, and welcome, Mr. Tafazul Mia.
Assalamu alaikum. What a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Now let's take a short clip of today's topic.
Episode 2. Health, safety and food safety issues. COVID compliance has now become a legal obligation. If you don't follow the standards, you will get fines of up to £10,000 and forced to close your doors. COVID-19 Preventive Measures for Restaurants. Part 1. Best practices. Create a safety plan and carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment. Introduce new entrance protocols with sanitizing station, temperature check using thermal imaging camera, new one-way system, and filling in the track and trace form. Practice physical distancing, staying 2 meters away from others. Minimize contact with droplets of mucus or saliva. Keep hands, surfaces and objects clean, and prevent contact with potentially infected people. Restaurant reopening checklist. Check your local authority is informed of current food activities. Update your food safety management system for any new procedures. Check registered waste carrier services. Check your restaurant site, equipment, raw materials and ingredients. Check allergen information is accurate and available for all products. Recognize hazards and assess risk. People who have fever, coughing, runny nose, tiredness, shortness of breath should self-isolate. Consult public health information to learn more about the symptoms of COVID-19 infection. Recognize and report these hazards and use appropriate controls.
Welcome back, viewers. In segment 1 of the show, we will take a look at preventive measures and adapting to changes during the crisis. Let's go to segment 1. Dear viewers, before I continue, don't forget to visit our website, obviously, and download the Catering Circle website, the app, so you can see the live show as and when you want, whenever. Brilliant. Now let's go to our guests and start off with some questions. I'm going to start off to my left here with Samad Bhai. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, do you think the government guidelines are working, and why do you think so?
Well, it's a very difficult question. The government guidelines are working. Debatable, because everyone is confused, including the Prime Minister, what the rules are.
Because today, I believe he came out with, he didn't know the rule of 6.
That's right, yes.
He's the one giving us advice, isn't
That's
it?
right,
Which
yes.
is a shambles.
So imagine us being restaurateurs and general public, how are we to follow these complicated rules? And if you make a mistake, you have to pay £10,000 fine, then the rule of 6 people, and then in various areas, next door people you cannot mix with. And then you have the catering industry. Catering industry, you know, I'm sure we'll get to this question afterwards, but catering industry as well, it is confusing as well. And so we have to, whatever the rules are, we have to adapt by it. Because end of the day, the restaurants are a place for like a social gathering.
Absolutely.
So if the restaurateurs are not careful, and the staff, then there will be problems, severe problems. So every restaurateur and the staff have to be extremely careful and follow the hygiene rules, like, you know, sanitization, entering from one door and departing at the other door. And so there are many items which I'm sure we'll discuss soon. So restaurateurs, the owners and the staff have got a big responsibility to make sure that all the rules are complied with.
We have these rules. We need to comply with them as restaurateurs. But how can we comply with them if the messages are completely mixed from our leader, who doesn't seem to know the rules himself?
Well, I think give him the benefit of doubt.
I think we've given him one too many.
There has been lot of sort of misunderstanding and understanding of a rule, but on the other hand, if you look at it, from a different angle, nobody has ever, no government, no public, no individual have ever faced anything like this.
Absolutely.
So why I said benefit of doubt is because we are learning as we carry on.
Yeah.
So it is complicated, but we know the severity of this COVID-19. If you do not follow, if you abuse, if you do not follow, you wear mask and be sanitized, then, another person is going to get it, and we can see it is happening. It is happening right now.
Well, I guess obviously the virus is dynamic in a sense, and the pandemic is, and the government has to change its ways and rules.
That's right, yes.
every so often. So we can give them a bit of leeway. I'm gonna move on to Dr. Zaki Rezwana Anwar, and I'm gonna ask you, what should businesses do if an employee tests positive for COVID-19?
Thank you very much. Firstly, I have to say that the way the restaurant and the owner of the restaurants, they're operating now in COVID time or in post-COVID, I would mention, it's totally different from how they operated in pre-COVID time. So, and coronavirus is a public health issue. So it's not only doctors' duty, nurses' duty, health professionals' duty. Everybody has to do their bit. It's a collective responsibility. It's not that if I get it, I will get the treatment. It's nothing like cancer, that if I have the cancer, I will get the best treatment. It's nothing like that.
Of course.
So basically, the restaurant owners, they have now more responsibility now. Regarding the screening, I think yes. And the thing is, now the symptoms, is the changing. When at the very beginning of the pandemic, we only knew that we have the cough and fever. These are very typical sore throat, very typical type of symptoms. But it's now changed, like loss of smell, headache, very low grade temperature.
If I was working in a restaurant, for example, and I came in and I said, I have these symptoms, what would you expect the restaurateur to do in that situation? And how would we move?
The restaurant owners now need to keep themselves up to date with the symptoms. So if anybody, any of the employees said that he has got even the diarrhea, nothing to do with fever, any symptoms or signs, mostly symptoms, I would say, then I think is the restaurant owner's responsibility to do the screening, because and not only the screening of the person who has been affected, but the other staff as well, because they came into contact with them. So, and the thing is, even the screening is, even when the test was done, if the test result is negative, even then the employee should be sent home. Because you don't know, maybe this now is negative after 2-3 days or 4 days. Because the incubation period, what we call is incubation period, means that when you get the germ, from that day till you develop the symptoms. So it's 14 days, and it's a very notorious virus. So you might not have positive results today, but you can have positive results
14
after a
days'
few
time.
days.
Yeah.
So if you have any symptoms like fever, sore throat, cough, diarrhea, tummy ache, or loss of smell, loss of taste, the employee should be screened and should be sent home. Whoever came in contact should be...
Should the business close?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
So should all the other employees be tested?
Should be tested. Should be tested.
Every other employee should be tested.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. I will come back to you a bit later on. Now we move on to Arlene. Arlene, what are the regulations on test and trace, and how do they work?
One would expect with the testing and tracing is that if you have been in contact, if you download the app, and if you have been in contact with someone who might have been detected to have had COVID-19, then you should have go and have a test done. But because there have been so many issues and problems with it, I think it's discouraging people from actually going to have the test done.
I mean, they developed an app straight after the pandemic started, didn't they? And then they cancelled it. It didn't quite work. They tried it out in, I think, the Isle of Wight.
The Isle of Wight.
And it was a complete failure because Apple and Google weren't
on board. They didn't want to do it with them.
Now they are on board. Now the test and trace app is active. Can we trust it? Does it work?
From what I understand, that in most cases it seems to work.
Okay.
The issue that I've heard most often with it is that when one tries to log on to do a test, is that people are often given far distances from where they live to actually go to get the test.
Okay.
I mean, if it's a distance where you can actually drive or get to, but you'll be going on a journey whereby you might have to stop. Again, if there is a suspicion that you might have the COVID-19, you shouldn't be stopping. You shouldn't be stopping at the petrol station because there's a petrol pump where you can be handling, pass on to someone else, you'll have to pay for that petrol. Again, you'll have contact with other people. So the ideal is to have a station, a testing station, where you are much closer to where you are living in order to have that test.
Segment one question.
If, in other cases, sometimes the distances are so vast that it's impossible. And that seems to be fairly common.
So I'm going to go to, thank you very much for that, Arlene. I'm going to go to Tafzul Bhai. Tell us what you have done for COVID compliance.
Well, what a pleasure to be here. Look, it's very important as a restaurateur you understand and ask yourself, how do you give your customers a COVID-19 secure experience? And more importantly for me, you need to ask yourself, how do I keep my staff safe as well? Now, we know this virus. I asked myself first thing, we know this virus is spreads on two things, the droplets and the contact. Now my job, I asked myself, my job is to avoid as much as all that. So firstly, all my staff, before post-lockdown, before we reopened on the 4th of July, all my staff did COVID-19 secure restaurant course. All the customers are screened with temperatures before they enter, hand sanitized. All our staff with record their name.
Excellent.
Has to be each shift temperature check. I mean, these are the things that you have to do minimum.
Excellent.
There are other things you can do, but these are minimum things. Hand sanitize. Now, when we reopen, we were given the task to keep a minimum 1 meter apart the tables. Some of my colleagues and friends...
Which has changed to 2 meters now, I take it.
It was 2 meters, then we fought for the 1 meter. Luckily, the government did, because majority of the restaurant wouldn't have been worth their while to open with 2 meter. So what we had to do is lose out, have a 1 meter distance with screening. One party in and out policy. And now it's maximum 6 per table. This is very, very, very important.
Excellent.
You got to maintain that. And recently, last Thursday, I thought that was a bit of, a final nail in the coffin, was closing at 10 o'clock, which I thought didn't work at all.
We will come back on that topic a bit later on, but thank you very much for that. A successful restaurateur giving his advice on how he's coping with it and how he's running it. Now, we're going to go to a Zoom call now. We're going to go to Professor David Foskett, who's the chairman of International Hospitality Council. He's a business development consultant of Welcome Skills as well. Good evening, Professor Foskett.
Good evening. I'm very pleased to be with you. Thank you for asking me.
Excellent. Now, I'm going to ask you, Professor Foskett, what government guidelines are available for working safely during COVID-19 to all our viewers?
Well, the UK Hospitality Trade Body has issued all the guidelines, which you can find on the internet. I think what's important is we've been advising a number of restaurants, Welcome Skills, throughout the country, and we also work internationally. And we also listen to what's going on in other countries. And I said from the very beginning that face masks were absolutely essential. They're essential in the kitchen, in the production kitchen, and they're essential in the actual restaurant. Frequent hand washing staff. There is one restaurant in Bangalore who sent me a video where every 20 minutes a bell rings and all the staff have to wash their hands and sanitize their hands. So there's lots of information on the internet about what restaurateurs should do. There's lots of guidance. Of course, sanitization is very important. To sanitize the tables, the chairs, sanitize the restaurant. I would recommend also that temperature checks when customers come in. I've said that to a number of restaurateurs. Temperature checks are very important, making sure that every customer actually sanitizes their hands. One restaurant I went to check on their sanitization, every table in the restaurant had a small bottle of sanitizer. And it was actually branded by the restaurant. So they had the restaurant brand on it. So you
they're
sat
branding
on the
themselves.
table, as soon as you sat down, you sanitized your hands.
So they're branding themselves as well at the same time as keeping customers safe.
I think was very clever.
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, I did say to the restaurant owner, well, someone's going to put that in their handbag. And he said, well, that's not a problem because they're taking our brand away as well.
Professor Foskett,
they're not worried about it. So it is about constant sanitization, constant hand washing, face masks, and that is absolutely essential in the operation, but also in the front of house and back of house. So I said this earlier on, long before it was mentioned that safe masks should be worn in the restaurant, were compulsory. But in Hong Kong, for example, from day one and in Singapore, face masks were absolutely essential, and you had to
Thank you very much.
with the government guidelines.
Thank you very much, Professor Foskett. We will be moving on to another Zoom call. We have Mr. Shagir Bakht Farouk with us today. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you a question let's introduce Mr. Shagir Bakht Farouk first, obviously. He's the ex-president of the British Bangladeshi Chamber of Commerce and Industries, accredited trainer of Chartered Institute of Environmental Health and Royal Society of Public Health. Excellent. And to such a well-accomplished gentleman, the question I'm going to ask you is, Do premises need to undertake a risk assessment? And if so, what are those assessment measures?
Thank you very much. It's a very good question and very relevant for the COVID-19. Before I answer that question, let me tell you one thing. First of all, the Bangladeshi restaurants or the Indian restaurants, they never had to go through all the risk assessment or food hygiene or hazard analysis critical control point because it wasn't there before even 1990 when the Food Safety Act came into being. We did not have to go through all the written risk assessment before the Act came into being in 1974. So it was okay before. But now that the COVID-19 has come and it has already affected the economy of not only Great Britain, but the rest of the whole world. So we as restaurateurs and the catering industry are also affected. And that is why we have to remember that we should not give up anything. We have to follow the rules and regulations from the government, and we have to abide by the risk assessment, as you said. If there are more than 5 people in a premises, then they should have a written risk assessment. We had it before, and the people used to write their risk assessment. Even without writing, if the employees were less than 5, they knew about the risk assessment. But the COVID-19 risk assessment is a new chapter, and we have to be very careful about reading and going through the new chapter which has suddenly come to our life. So you cannot avoid it. Rather, we have to accept it, and we have to find out who are the people who will be affected in our premises. Write it down. How you can identify that you can control these hazards. Write it down. And then you can find out that easily you are controlling because you know how to protect yourself, how to protect your own staff, how to protect your customers, how to protect your visitors or any outsiders who are coming to your premises. So that is how you can save yourself and the others as well, by following the rules, regulations, and abiding by all the rules that are coming from the government, and to make sure that you are not giving in, but you are fighting for it. You must stay in the business and you must do whatever you need to do. That's my short answer to your question.
Thank you very much. We'll take a break now and we'll be back shortly. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers, and welcome back after a short break. We will be asking Samad Bhai again some more questions. So, Samad Bhai, what more can be done to help the restaurant industry right now?
Well, to begin with, you know, this rule of up to 10 p.m. is totally unhelpful. It's not just for the restaurant community, but for the greater public, because everyone is going to aim for up to 10 o'clock, and there will be a rush. There will be a lot of mixing outside. And I have seen some news as well that they just go out of the restaurant and into the street and party there, partying there. So, and then if they go to tube station or a bus or everywhere, there will be an influx of people everywhere. So I think that's one negative side where government can help. The other is, as Tafazul was saying earlier on, that his customers, for instance, maybe up to 6, but they have to come at 8 o'clock to
so you're saying the timings are now more condensed, which will mean
that's right.
A more
to
packed
leave
restaurant.
at 10. And then he cannot serve people who came at 9 o'clock.
So you definitely don't agree with this guideline?
No, I don't. So I think the government could look into it and immediately do something about it. And then there are other areas. I don't know if you would let me speak.
I'm going to come back to you 100%, but I'm going to move on to Tafazul Bhai with a quick question before he leaves us. How do you think we can stay safe and run a successful restaurant business?
Well, it's a good question. Look, we are at unprecedented time, and regulation guidelines are changing every day. If you have to survive in this toughest of the toughest time, you have to be prudent. Now, we got the grant, we had the bounce back loan, and I have to say, in my own emission, the Eat Out to Help Out government scheme helped us. It may have affected otherwise, I won't go into that. These are the money which has been coming into your account. Of course, you are paying your rent, your professional accountant fee, electricity standing order, and what have you. But be prudent and do not spend these money unwisely.
Absolutely.
Because I think we're not even over. Today we had 7,000 cases of positive. So we've got a long way to go. We might have a proper lockdown again as well, because the government, to be honest with you, like Samad Bhai said, they completely got this wrong at 10 o'clock because it's affecting the public as well as the restaurateurs. So these things will come along. We will be stumbling along. We will be losing money, but be prudent and follow the guideline. And more importantly, we're going to finish by saying this, the guideline 10 o'clock. Make sure you lock the door at 10 o'clock because this is a very serious one. Not far from where we are, Red Bridge, on Monday, somebody's got a £10,000 fine. And this is very serious. We have to follow that.
But what is the scientific evidence that closing at 10 o'clock actually... I'll present that question to Dr. Zaki.
This is what I can't agree.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't make sense.
What happened is this 10 o'clock curfew was not recommended by any scientist. It came from number 10 Downing Street, and what the government did, they just blindly copied the formula of Belgium, what happened in Belgium. In summer, the death rates went up, so
We have actually got a topic on the 10 o'clock thing, which I'm definitely going to be asking you, Dr. Zaki. But we're going to move over to Dr. Foskett really quickly.
Yes, what?
Dr. Foskett, I've got some questions for you. A couple of questions. The first one, what are the food and safety and hygiene guidances available for the restaurants during this pandemic? And secondly, I'm going to ask you about the rule of 6, which our Prime Minister doesn't seem to know about. And I'm hoping you will answer that for us tonight.
Okay, fine. Well, can I just say, first of all, with regard to the 10, can I come in about the 10 p.m.?
You can come in about the 10 p.m. and we'll move on to the...
just very quickly, I don't think restaurants are the problem. It's bars and pubs and alcohol that is the problem. And what I would do, I would review the time for restaurants, but I would bring in licensing laws, quick licensing laws for pubs and bars, because long before COVID, we have an alcohol problem in this country, no doubt about it. So that needs reviewing. The food and guidance, food safety, there's plenty again on the internet, on the government website. You go onto the government website, and you also go onto the Food Standards Agency website. There's plenty of guidance there as well. That's very important to log into the internet on a regular basis.
Excellent.
The rule of 6, I don't know the answer. I don't know what the scientific evidence is for that. I think that the problem is we get so many mixed messages. You can have 15 at a wedding, you can have 30 at a funeral. I don't know where all this is coming from and what the scientific evidence is. I think what we have to do, we all have to follow the rules, and I keep saying this, and I listen to all the experts, epidemiologists throughout the country, all the professors. we have to manage our way through this. Face masks, hand washing, social distances, obey the rules. How many people have you found when you go to the supermarket that are not wearing a mask? It infuriates me. Yeah?
Thank you, Dr. Foskett. We're going to move on to Mr. Shagir Bakht Farouk. And the question I have for you, sir, is what do restaurants need to consider when there is a suspected case of COVID-19 in the workplace?
Thank you. I think if there is a suspected case for COVID-19, I think you should take it very seriously. First duty will be, first call or port will be to report it to your manager. And the manager can refrain the staff from working and write it down in your book, The Safer Food, Better Business, as an evidence that you took some sort of precaution. And then you can send him for test and further test and whatever. But one thing we must not forget, that COVID-19 is
Thank you very much.
Very new. And that is because of this that.
Thank you. In segment 2 of the show, we will have a look at the government compliance checklist. Let's have a look at segment 2. So we're going to watch a short clip on today's topic.
COVID-19 preventive measures for restaurants, part 2. Controls. Knowledge sharing, sanitizing, customer and staff screening. Install clear signage saying no to individuals who have symptoms of COVID-19. Install soap, hand sanitizers and alcohol gel dispensers. Update voicemail, email, social media and website to inform customers of changes to the business operations. Eliminate or minimize exposure. Physical distancing. Reduce congestion using more entry points, staggering shifts, break times, entry times. Use personal protective equipment, PPE, gloves, face masks, face coverings. Disinfection and sanitizing. Maintain clean workstations, EPOS machines, cash registers, counters and equipment. Surfaces must be disinfected prior to and after each touchpoint. Maintaining records and GDPR. NHS test and trace must be handled in accordance with GDPR. Assessing risks and reviewing. Maintain HACCP-based food safety management system. Safer Food, Better Business, SFBB PACS. Food safety for food delivery. Hygiene and allergy advice for takeaways and food delivery businesses.
Welcome back. We have a new guest with us now. Let me introduce you to Shahina Ali, a celebrity chef, a TV and radio personality, a BBC expert on nutrition, natural and herbal medicine, and healthy food and cookery. That was a long list.
It's a pleasure.
Nice to meet you. Assalamu alaikum. Now, I'm probably going to start off with you first now. So, what are the regulations on PPE at the moment and face covering, and how do these work?
So face coverings, obviously, it has carried over from the lockdown period where people are required to wear face coverings indoors. However, the key thing I think we need to emphasise is the fact that public sentiment is the fact that they want to go out and eat, but they want to see and have confidence in an establishment preparing everything with precautions and taking precautions as much as possible. So screens and such, and obviously in terms of PPE, having gloves and sanitizers nearby as well, and wearing gloves when they're doing handovers with other staff members. And so it's a case where it is ever changing, but it still remains the same. Face coverings now also indoors, apart from when you're sitting down with a group of 6, for example.
I think now it's mandatory for the staff to also wear face coverings as well, which should obviously induce some kind of
confidence in
the public, obviously. Well, thank you very much for that. I'm going to move on to Arlene very quickly. What are the regulations for the rule of 6?
6 persons only
Yeah.
at any one table.
Okay.
And I was asked the other day, well, if there's a party of 10 or 12, what can we do? Yes, you can still have your party of 10 or 12, but in 2 separate tables. And you should also ensure that nothing is shared between the tables. So whatever's laid on one table is not passed on to the other table for sharing. So you still are able to comply with the rule of 6, but have your party, but just distance away, one group away from the other. So
if I had a table of 12, how, as a restaurant?
No, you wouldn't have a table of 12. You would have 2 tables of 6 persons on each table.
If, for instance, I wanted to book a table of 18 for my family, how would the restaurant work?
You would have to find out if that restaurant is able to accommodate 18 in 3 separate tables.
Excellent, excellent.
And that distancing, again, no sharing of any items from one table to the next.
Which is a brilliant point you've just made there. I think a lot of restaurateurs do not understand that concept yet. They are separating the tables of 6, but sharing between the tables isn't being done clearly.
You should rely on the staff to actually go from one table to the next.
Okay.
But not you physically getting up to go to the other table and not sharing any items from one table with another table.
Fantastic. Brilliant piece of advice there. Thank you very much, Arlene. I'm going to move on to Dr. Zaki. A point we made previously about the 10 p.m. The question I asked before was, scientifically, what logic is there for this 10 p.m. curfew?
Okay, thank you.
And does it apply to takeaways as well? Takeaway food within restaurants as well?
It doesn't apply to takeaway delivery. Anyway, this 10 p.m. curfew, this rule, government didn't discuss with the SAGE, the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies. I mean, the idea came from 10 Downing Street just because recently Belgium, they introduced this, but they introduced this in sometime in end of July because their death rate was highest in the world. And now Peru has taken over. So, and they saw that the death rate came down, but that's because at that time the schools were closed, and not only that, at that time they had strict social distancing measures in place. So you can't explain that because of the 11 p.m. In their case, there was 11 p.m. rule, the death rate has come down. So what
you're saying is that our government is taking these skewed statistics from another country.
One of measure is doing more harm, because when you are in a restaurant, you are in a controlled environment, like you have, as she was saying, that this table of 6 and whatever, and this rule, the 10 p.m. curfew is pushing out this public from a controlled environment to an uncontrolled street and to the overcrowded public transport and house party. And the common, I mean, the treatment has improved a lot, but it's all about the public behavior. So if
you're not very confident in what our government is doing with regards to the 10 p.m. thing. What about the test and trace app? What about the testing centres and so forth?
Testing and
the
tracing.
QR code.
Yeah, testing and tracing. We are nowhere near where we should be. And recently the app government has, this is the second time, the first one didn't work. And the most disadvantage is you cannot download it in old phone. Old means like if you have 13.5, below 13.5 iPhone, you can't download, and you have to have 6, in Android you have to have 6. Not only that, you have to use the Bluetooth. So if there is any other device, Bluetooth, in that area, it interferes with your signal, and in many cases it gives you false positive. So, and there are lots of.
So that's 2 things you think which definitely aren't working. What about the QR code menus? I'm going to ask
Key
you.
workers?
The QR code menus.
Okay, so the government has said that every restaurant and every public venue, they should have the QR code in front of the door. And then when you go to the restaurant or wherever, you on your camera, you just scan the QR.
Do you think that's working rather than physical menus,
in
or
first
with
two
regards
nights,
to the
first
NHS
2 nights,
tracing
lots
up?
of diners, they tweeted that it didn't work.
Okay.
So it's still in I would say this app is still in
its infancy.
primitive, it's still in primitive stage. A lot of work needs to be done.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Foskett. I'm gonna ask you the exact same question about the NHS test and trace app. Is it working? Is the 10 p.m. deadline curfew working? Give us your thoughts.
Well, first of all, the 10 p.m. curfew, well, the good doctor said, you know, they're out on the streets. So you're exacerbating the problem. You're not solving the problem, you're making the problem worse. And as I said before, this is not restaurants, this is mainly bars and pubs. So that needs to be looked at. The track and trace. I remember many months ago when this started, Lord Billamora of Chelsea, founder of Cobra Beer, said on Question Time, it is essential we have a very effective track and trace system. That is the key to where we need to go to prevent any further lockdown. I listen to all the experts. They say now the track and trace system is working, but how many people do we know have downloaded the app? That's the key. It will only work if people download the app. And there is a QR code on every shop, supermarket, restaurant, so that you can then QR code and they can trace where people are if there is a case of COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Foskett.
We've
Thank
got
you.
to encourage people to download this app. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to move on to Samad Bhai and ask you a question regarding our community. You're a community man. So what should we do as a community to follow these government guidelines? Do we need any sort of actions, lobbying the government to do so? Or what are your thoughts?
I think, first of all, our community has been behaving quite well, I would say. If you compare, the sea beaches and all this, although there has been some, rise in Red Bridge and few other areas. So our community, I think, is fairly aware of this situation, but I don't think they're aware of the severity now, because it's rapidly increasing. So my suggestion would be the community organizations will have to play their part around the nation. And then each area, each towns and cities, the restaurateurs as well, get together and relay the messages and help one another.
The restaurateurs can get together. That is a fantastic thing, but they obviously are attached to unions such as the BCA and people like that. What are the leaders of those unions actually doing?
Yeah, I was coming to that.
Restaurants?
I was coming to that. So regionally, towns and cities, because they know one another, they get together and they help each other. Then nationally, there are, the organizations, they have to come forward.
Yeah.
They have to come forward.
But are they coming forward at the moment?
I don't think
I'm paying, as a restaurateur, for instance, not in the industry anymore, but many restaurateurs I know are paying their £50 or £100 yearly license. What are these people doing for us restaurateurs?
Well, I would say that not much. This is why, because I said about the regional, help one
it's
another.
Nonsensical,
because
isn't it? All that money that we're giving, all of those resources that they have, surely they should be actively lobbying the government to help us out in this time and in this situation. We have obviously had government help financially, But in terms of guidelines, I don't think it's as clear as mud to us at the moment. Surely some of those leaders should actually get up, do some work and speak to the government regarding all of this and clear it up for us restaurateurs.
I agree. I agree. Because it is disappointing in many areas. We did not get the correct guidance and leadership. And this is why Catering Circle came up.
Yeah.
Came up. It wasn't.
Well, we are here to obviously explain to the public what's going on and
no, I mean Catering
what's
Circle
not going on.
4 years ago, 5 years ago came up because the organizations were not doing their job as such.
So are they doing it now? Do you see them as fit? Are they fit to do their job? After 4 years of us lobbying these people, I'm going to ask you, the main man here, are they actually fit for purpose? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Should I be diplomatic?
Don't be diplomatic. This is the Catering Circle. Let's tell them
I think they're not doing as they should have done.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I would say that Channel S has been doing its more than its share.
You'll say that you're the vice chairman.
No, chairman.
What, you're the chairman, sorry, I do apologize. What would you do if you were in their shoes? Tell us.
I would sort of reach out, first of all, the members, and then I would get in touch with parallel organizations.
Okay.
They don't like each other, but I would make them come and sit on one table. I tried in the past. They will not sit in a round table meeting to address various problems. They would not. But this is high time now.
If they're watching, then they obviously know your answer.
I invited.
I'm going to move on to Arlene before we create any more controversy. Arlene, what training is available for COVID compliance?
Okay. For information, there is a lot of information. There is information on the internet. You just put in COVID-19 and a lot of information will come up about COVID-19. The local authority also provide a lot of information regarding what practices should be carried out at the restaurant, what is expected of you. I also do COVID-19 training, so many restaurants have asked me to come in to do COVID risk assessments for them, and I go and I put together a risk assessment based on what I see and what their practices are. And one of the issues here is that I think some of the staff don't appreciate the importance
or the severity
of the situation, and in many cases, if they were to follow normal hygiene processes, then the COVID would just be a short extension.
Absolutely.
But many times they don't practice normal hygiene procedures, and therefore this new COVID risk assessment is something altogether new and starting from scratch. And they need to understand why they're doing what they're doing. For example, I went into a restaurant myself the other day, and I was stopped at the door, and someone aimed a thermometer at my forehead.
But they didn't tell you.
And I thought, that's fine, that's great. You know, this cafe has actually implemented this. And then she was there for some considerable time. I thought, what's wrong with me? And I said, what is my temperature? She said, 31. I said, what? 31 Celsius? She said, oh, let me try it again.
Let me try it again.
She tried again. I said, what is it this time? 31.5. I said, I think I should be dead. If this is my temperature, I shouldn't be walking. So they need to be trained how to use the equipment as well.
They need another one. Yes. They need a backup. Yes. We're going to move on with the final question of segment 2. We're going to move on to Zakia Fahir. And because you're from a health background, I'm going to ask you, what sort of employee health issues should a restaurateur be aware of, and mental health issues, and what can the restaurateur do to help their employees out in that respect?
Okay, I think it's a very important question because, as you know, the second wave is coming.
Depression and
as you know, because second wave is coming, and as we all know that in pandemic, it's not always the first wave, second wave, third wave, even fourth wave, even in Spanish flu or whatever. But that's why and it's not going to finish very soon. Even if we have the vaccine, it will not go away like this. The infection rate will come down slowly. So that's why it's very important that the restaurant owners, they understand the mental health implications, both physical and mental. Especially mental, you can't see.
What are the signs? What should they do to find out these things? Because it's not very easy.
Yeah, you can't see them, and you don't have any blood tests so to say that you have the mental depressed. So what they should do is every day. I mean, a lot of things that restaurateurs, they need to do it differently now. So like for every day, they should have a quick 10 minutes discussion with the staff to see how they are doing and whatever. And if someone is feeling, because sometimes someone is not feeling well in physically, but they are fearing that he will send home, and they shouldn't feel. And every time, as Samad Bhai was saying, every time the government policy is changing, so it's a lot of pressure. And
thank you so much for that. I'm going to have to cut you short, unfortunately, Doctor. Lastly, I'm going to quickly go over to Mr. Shagir Bakht Farooq and ask you, what strategies of cleaning and disinfection in the workplace do we have at the moment, and should we take? And your final comments for everyone, please.
Thank you. I think cleaning and disinfection, this is a very important element. Take a proactive step so that there is no
I think we're having technical issues with Mr. Farooq at the moment, so I'm going to put Shahina on the spot and ask you the same question.
If you want to repeat the question again.
So what are we doing with regards to cleaning and disinfecting our premises and the kitchen and so forth?
Yeah, so basically in terms of cleaning, we need to have several hand sanitisation spots for sure. And again, like was said earlier, if it's not something that's been dealt with in terms of hygiene as well before, it's another extra hurdle that needs to be relearnt by the staff members, and it's really important to try and keep up to date with that. So all the staff members need to be kept up to date. The regulations keep changing as well, so they need to be kept up to date regularly by the managers of the restaurant. Also, make sure that all the handover points as well kept to a minimum between staff members. It might be an idea to try and partner up some of the staff members as well, so that there's not cross-contamination. If someone's ill, for example, you can always trace that back as well, and it's minimising the number of people affected.
Is that what you've done with your...
Yeah, I would definitely advise people to do that, and it's something where we need to have also one-way traffic systems and as many entry points as possible in terms of exit and entry points, so people are not able to have close contact with each other. There's more social distancing.
Thank you very much for that. That was very interesting. We're going to go on a short break and we'll see you back in a moment. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. In segment 3, we'll be looking at how to stay safe with survival strategies. Let's go to segment 3. Just before I introduce our new guest to you, viewers, don't forget to log into our website and also download our Catering Circle app, where you can live stream all the programs on Channel S. We have a new guest with us tonight, and I want to introduce you guys to Safwan Chowdhury. He's the winner of the Restaurant Talent Show Awards 2017, a man I'm actually very, very impressed by, and in my opinion, has already done what most restaurateurs can only dream of. Very, very hardworking boy, I'll call you, because I'm a lot older than you.
Thank you.
Very young entrepreneur.
Thank you, Akif. Thank you.
Nice to have you with us today. I'm going to start off with you, Safwan, and ask you, how do you think we can stay safe and run a successful takeaway business specifically?
I think, Akbar, the main issue we need to deal with is operating a safe business. And from the Environmental Health or the local council, when you open a food business, you're issued a pack, safer food, better business. If you operate to the legislation, regular hand washing, keeping distance between staff and customers, even between staff and staff, regular hand washing, keeping the premises ventilated, and if you follow the guidelines of your safer food, better business and enhance the risk assessments in place for COVID, I think you can run a very, very successful takeaway business. On top of that, staggering your collection times, encouraging customers to order ahead so that way there are not people coming in, and increasing the interaction between staff and customers. So you should aim for your customer coming in and leaving the premises, or you order a delivery contact-free, where you knock on the door, leave the takeaway at the door, and safely wait for the customer to receive their order, whilst keeping insulated with the insulated bag and heated bags, etc. I think now, with a lot of customers staying at home, the circumstances of people losing their jobs or furloughed, we have to focus on the takeaway side of business.
So with regards to the takeaways, what have you had to specifically change in your delivery system?
We're a takeaway business outright. We're not a restaurant.
Okay.
From the beginning of the pandemic, we realized that this is very serious. We took the challenge very seriously, and we stopped doing collection completely. So we focus our business on a delivery trade, whereby no customers are coming in the premises, no customers are leaving the premises. And as the situation relaxed, we obviously started the collection, because delivery is very, very hard to manage such a wide radius. Right now in place is the protective guard between the customer and the server.
So you've got your screens
the
up.
screens, increased sanitation. So between the entrance and the front desk, having sanitation stations for the customers, ensuring all customers come in with a mask. So clear signage.
Excellent.
And those who cannot wear a mask, we kindly ask them not to enter premises, because obviously there are some exceptions. There are some people who don't or can't wear a mask, but we do require by the law now to make sure the staff who is serving the customer and the customers themselves enter the premises with a mask.
Say if I came in with an ailment, say for instance, whatever they may be, say asthma, and I can't wear my mask, will I be allowed into your takeaway?
I think we would ask you to kindly leave and either place your order for delivery, or we'd ask you to wait outside the premises, because the legislation now, we should really enforce it. I think now the fine is up to £200 for an individual if they're not wearing a mask in an enclosed premises. And I think
But what if they're exempt?
If they're exempt, I think you shouldn't discriminate on the person who is exempt, but to keep everybody safe. And obviously, for the outside world, the outside perspective,
Kindly obviously ask the customer to wait outside.
just for out of respect, you should kindly request them to not
What
enter.
if one of them is your employee who can't physically wear a mask?
This is a question we get a lot, and
Are there any government guidelines stating what we should do with an employee who can't wear a mask?
I think the best way to deal with the employee who can't wear a mask is to restructure their job role to ensure they can work in a safe space where they can also work without having to wear their masks. For example, if they're working on the delivery side of operations where they're outside, out and about, but removing their role from the customer-facing side, because the person who deals with the customer must wear a mask.
Needs to feel safe.
Yeah,
Obviously.
exactly.
The customer needs to feel safe.
And from the outside perspective, if you're like ourselves, a glass-fronted shop,
Yeah.
from the outside world, you're seeing a staff member who's not wearing a mask,
Yeah.
who's in the front-facing, without knowing their circumstances. Likewise, you see a customer who's not wearing a mask, who's in the premises from the outside, you're not going to think, is that
Of
person
course.
exempt, Somebody like yourself, very young person who is very fit,
I wouldn't say young.
you presume something, without the fine details. So I think it's really, really, important we stay careful and keep up to date with the new rules. Every day something is coming up, and that's the main thing, I
Do
think.
you use the exempt badges that are available?
They are available,
Yeah.
and fortunately none of our staff are exempt, so we do not use them.
You don't
but
need
we are trained to be able to recognise that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Safwan. I'm going to go to another Catering Circle winner from the Restaurant Talent Show Awards, Mr. Ash Mia from 2017. He's also a successful entrepreneur and owner of Cinnamon Spice. Let's go over to the Zoom call. Assalamu alaikum, Ash bhai.
Wa alaikum salam. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Ash bhai, I'm going to go straight on with it. How do you think we can stay safe? Sorry, I do apologize. What preventative measures do we need to take to keep ourselves safe from the second wave of COVID-19?
Well, I actually agree with the government guidelines. I think that they are obviously trying to protect the public, the general public, and the local citizens from a second wave, a longer lockdown. And this is why we must follow the guidelines that they have come out with. I mean, in reality, there may be differences of opinions, whether scientific evidence or general view on the 10 o'clock shutdown law. I personally think that the whole agenda is trying to minimize the death rates and infection rates. And that's the reason why they're trying to make sure that they...
Excellent. So, Ashbhai, I asked the same question to Safwan before. You obviously own a restaurant. So how do you think we can stay safe and run a successful restaurant?
I mean, running a successful restaurant during the pandemic, COVID-19, during that particular time is a very challenging period. We've never seen something like this in history. This is the most toughest time in business for especially the service industry. So I would suggest to anyone out there is to comply with the government guidelines. Obviously, that's a must, it's a mandatory. But making sure that you can make a video, create a video on social media to show that what you are doing in the restaurant in terms of cleaning, sanitization, how you are managing the whole management of COVID-19, how you implementing social distancing in the restaurant, so the customers can watch the video and feel comfortable to come and dine at your restaurant.
I'm going to go over to Dr. Foskett on the Zoom call, and I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Ash before. So what preventative measures can we take to keep ourselves safe from a second wave from the COVID-19?
Well, I think the most important thing is we're all in this together and follow the rules, stick to the rules rigidly. I very much like the last speaker when he said, make a video of what you're doing. I think that's excellent. And it's very similar to what a restaurant in Bangalore sent me, what they're doing. And I would have full confidence in dining in that restaurant in Bangalore because they've clearly shown all the preventative measures that they are taking to combat this COVID-19. You know, a second lockdown would be disastrous. It would be absolutely disastrous. I mean, there won't be an economy. It will be mass depression. We cannot afford another lockdown. We have to pull ourselves and we have to manage our way through this pandemic. And, you know, some of the speakers tonight, all the speakers tonight have been absolutely excellent. And what they've said is very much about managing our way through this pandemic. You know, share information, see what other restaurants are doing, and share the information with one another. And one thing that, for example, in Switzerland, my colleague in Switzerland said to me, we are compliant. The Swiss nation by nature is compliant, and we don't have the problems that you've got. My colleague in Hong Kong said exactly the same. You know, we're being compliant.
Sorry, Dr. Foskett.
Following the rules and being compliant.
Do you think that
with the video, let's restaurants produce a video to show us the way forward.
Do you think that comes from our government guidelines rather than the Swiss people and the British people?
I think that, to be honest with the government in Switzerland they have a clear strategy. I think the problem we've had with this government is we've had lots of mixed messages. And I think some people have lost faith, but we can't lose faith. We've got to try and manage our way through the system ourselves.
Thank
if
you,
you
Dr.
ask
Foskett.
me, could they have managed it better? Yes, I believe they could have done. And when there's an inquiry, there's going to be a lot that's going to show up of what they didn't do. But we have to all pull together in this. It's absolutely essential that we do that.
Thank you, Dr. Foskett. I'm going to quickly move over to Shahina Ali. As a chef, please tell us what steps we need to take in the kitchen to remain COVID compliant.
So in terms of looking at COVID compliancy, it's basically the health and safety issues and looking at, firstly, we come out of lockdown, you need to, when you're reoperating your
The hygiene measures.
Hygiene measures, yeah. So looking at different sanitisation stations, and there needs to be several in each area, in the kitchen, for example, and also as outside. Also contact points as well need to be minimised as much as possible between the chef and also the waiting staff.
Is there a minimum amount of people that are allowed in a kitchen? Are there any guidelines advising us on that, or is it just a 2 metre?
It needs to be a 2 metre distance, really. Okay. That's really the key point. But also in terms of looking at how you can really make it more efficient in terms of the way we used to operate before. We can't operate like that anymore. We need to make sure that you don't have overcrowding in the kitchen, like you mentioned about minimum people, but also you need to make sure that the partnering up of staff members is quite good to have to minimise contact between other staff members and contain any sort of contagious infection.
I'm going to come back to you on that point. As a chef and as someone in the kitchen, I think a lot of people have been struggling, especially with the Eat Out to Help Out, in maintaining that 2 metre distance rule in the kitchen, because it's been so busy. They've had to put in more people, so they haven't really been COVID compliant. So, I mean, we're doing the Eat Out to Help Out, making the restaurants a lot busier, but then we're telling kitchen staff that they can only have 3 people in the kitchen. How can they cope?
That's understandable completely, and it's obviously a dilemma that needs to be looked at more closely, and it's not really been thought out very well. When everything was implemented, the Eat Out to Help Outs, and it was just basically just announced. It wasn't really gradually placed in or anything like that. So we have to try and adapt to that. And I think it's really important to try and see how we can basically employ technology as much as possible, how we can automate certain processes as well, using certain machinery in the kitchen, and makes things faster, as well as being able to reduce the number of staff in one area. So that's one way of doing that.
Thank you very much for that, Shahina. I'm going to move on to Samad Bhai. How can restaurants avoid this 10K fine? And namely, I think you mentioned before the Redbridge restaurant that got fined the 10K. How can we avoid that?
Well, basically, we all know the answer. Comply by the regulations. Be strict. What happens within our community is, when it comes to
we get
doing
greedy.
Something discipline and things, we most of the time try to overlook, So I think it's high time now we take it seriously.
Do you think that's just with our community and Indian restaurants, or does it go over to...
No, I just want to talk about my community and my restaurants.
So at the moment you're saying they're not complying with the guidelines?
Well,
because they lack discipline.
I'm not saying that. They are complying, but newer and newer rules and regulations come in. So, as Shahina said, they have to adapt with that and be very strict, so that, we can avoid any fines.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to move over to Arlene really quickly and ask, what other government fines should we be aware of, and how do we avoid these fines?
As everyone has said before, be compliant. Be compliant at all times. And I do find that in the community, or the Bangladeshi community, in the restaurants that I've been into, there tends to be, they're my friends, they are good customers, we've had them for a long time, and so the boundary sort of slips somewhat.
But do you think that non-compliancy, as it were, comes from the fact that the government guidelines at the moment are as clear as mud? Or is it because...
No, if the government guideline says you must be 2 meters apart, there's no fuzzy guideline there. 2 meters is 2 meters. 1 meter with added protection is 1 meter with added protection. There's no fuzziness about those guidelines. Sanitize before you enter the restaurant. It needs to be done. No one should have to be chasing you to follow that guideline. And you should not be scared to tell the customers, you haven't sanitized, please go back and sanitize the hand. And people should understand that this is not just an exercise just for the sake of it. It is actually, there are important steps in not eliminating, but limiting the prospect of further spread of the virus. And this is what we're trying to do by putting in those very simple
Excellent.
rules.
I'm going to finish off by asking you all for your final comments. And I'm going to put you on the spot first, Arlene.
I think we should be compliant. I think we should follow the guidelines. Yes, many things change almost on a daily basis, but the fact that we should wear the mask to prevent droplets, to prevent other people from becoming infected, is still the same yesterday, today and tomorrow. To sanitize the hand, to try to destroy the COVID virus if you have been in contact with it, is the same yesterday, today and tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
So even if you don't agree, and there's so many variations of the rules and so on, those simple rules still exist, and it's for our own safety.
Excellent. Safwan, final comments?
An extension on this whole compliance is to each and every operator to make sure their doors are closed by 10 o'clock and everyone is out by 10 o'clock, and that's very clear. And secondly, I would say on the takeaway side of things, if you're operating where a customer cannot pay by card, ensure you ask them if they need change and take the change in a separate packet. We've been doing this for years because it minimises the hassle in a delivery. Before COVID, make sure if the customer needs change for £40, you take change for £40 in a packet straight away, and encourage people to pay by card, encourage people to order online in advance.
So you have been encouraging customers to go...
Where we closed for collection, we had no collections and we had no cash. This is for about 6 weeks.
A lot of restaurateurs in the industry will balk at the idea of making it completely
this is 2020 now. I think we have to move with the times. It's safer than sorry in that sense, and we have to adapt with this situation. Otherwise, down the line, to take your cash, you have a 10k fine if you're not complying with the rules. It's really, really important to ensure that you're minimising every contact as much as possible with the general public, with your staff, ensuring your staff are regularly reporting if they have any symptoms, to isolate, to ensure that your staff doesn't have a spread or an outbreak within your business.
Excellent.
And separating the staff as well. I think I was going to interrupt, but I didn't want to interrupt. With the kitchen side of things as well, to maybe split your team up. So we have, in majority of restaurants, I don't know how it is now, where, kitchen porters, cooks whose tasks are like to peel onions and potatoes and wash pans, keeping their duties in a separate area, in the storeroom or in the different department of the kitchen if your kitchen's big enough, and ensuring they're always regularly washing their hands and keeping, clean, wearing clean clothes every day, making sure that...
But what about your kitchen porter that needs to run to your chef to collect...
This is another problem with this whole 2-metre thing in the kitchen. It's impossible.
Excellent. I'm going to go to... Thank you very much for that, Safwan. I'm going to go to Shaina finally and ask you your final thoughts.
I think it's definitely, you have to give an incentive to the restaurant and takeaway holder owner to be able to follow through with compliance, because it looks like the compliance, they are going through the motions and thinking it's just another hurdle to go through, but not really following it closely. The incentive is the fact that it's actually a selling point to customers.
And their survival, obviously.
Absolutely. So short-term pain for long-term gain. And to customers, if, like as was mentioned before by Ash, if you show a video that you're being compliant and this is what you're doing, and you're quite obviously demonstrative about it in front of customers, they will want to come and visit you more because they think they're in a safe environment.
Thank you very much. Samad Bhai, your final thoughts?
I think in order to comply with all the rules and regulations, our restaurateurs and business owners will have to know about it more in order to know what is going on and the new rules and regulation. As I said before, community organizations as well as the catering organizations and businesses in the regions, towns and cities exchange their knowledge more, and we are here as Channel S, from a media platform. We are going to do everything we can.
The BCA and the unions aren't here. We're here for them.
Yeah, so they should play their part. We are a third party. We provide platform, but we are doing everything we can.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go over to Dr. Foskett finally on the Zoom call and ask you your final thoughts.
Final thoughts of this.
Your survival points for the many operators out
I think
there.
it's important that we all pull together, we become compliant, we follow the rules, we sanitize, and keep social distancing.
Excellent. I think that should be the new government slogan: sanitize, sanitize, sanitize. Thank you, Dr. Foskett. That was a fascinating insight into what challenges we are facing at the moment in this COVID pandemic, and how our industry is fighting back. I'd like to thank all of our guests tonight for giving us an insight into what they are doing and how they're helping their situation. I forgot to go over to Ash. We'll go over to Ash on the Zoom call. Mr. Ash Mia.
For the future of the restaurants, are you talking about? Sorry.
Yeah, so what can our many operators do to survive this COVID pandemic, finally, in your thoughts?
We need to cut costs on as much as possible on whether it's recruitment, just streamline the menu. Streamlining the menu will help, obviously, cut costs, which I've done in my business. Focus on limited products, and that the cost comes down straight away. Also, staffing. I've streamlined the staff. I've streamlined the kitchen staff. So I'm saving a lot of money on labour. But at the same time, I'm just trying to save money as the whole general costing of the business. So that's the way I think many businesses
Specifically
can survive.
COVID compliance and obviously health issues of which we are concentrating on tonight's episode. But thank you again, Ash Bhai, and excellent feedback from you tonight. So again, that was a fascinating insight into the health and safety aspect of restaurant operators and what they should be doing during this pandemic crisis. And I'd like to thank Samad Bhai, Safwan Bhai, I've got Shahina, and Arlene, and the other guests that were here with us tonight. Next week, we will have episode 3 on the 13th of October. Join us again. Again, log on to our website, download our Catering Circle app, and thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum.